The difference between them and myself would be that I really utilize the properties of sound libraries and just basically aim to make the sounds sound as absolutely authentic and realistic as they possibly can. And it's kind of like Photoshop for music. Essentially, is just being able to kind of manipulate the sounds and change them in a way that makes them sound as real as humanly possible.
That's so cool.
For me, I'm more of like the front end of it.
I'm just making it up. Of a similar nature or character.
JMKast. JMKast.
But we get shocked often by Chris.
If you Google my name, it always pulls up Ric Flair and Blackjack Mulligan. That's another story for another time, though. Oh, welcome back to the Insanity. This is the JMKast. I am your host, Rick Mulligan, along with my co-host, Greg T. Johnson. And then we're joined in studio by our bodyguard, Harvey Mulvihill.
How's it going, guys?
Harvey.
On the phone, we have our editor extraordinaire, Chris Palmer, who is amazing.
Chris.
And we're also joined by an extremely special guest, an amazingly talented music composer, Cody Martin, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
I only had that name one time, so I had to make sure I got it correct. I had only heard it once.
It was a test.
Yeah, Greg was testing me. He likes to do that to me. So welcome everyone to the show. We have a jam-packed episode. We have lots of people, lots of things happening. We're gonna talk music mostly this episode. I have a million questions, and I want to just hit the ground running here. First off, I have to know, Cody, give us a little bit of your backstory, just kind of who you are and how you got into this.
Yeah, I started fairly young, I guess. I got hooked on music pretty early in life, I suppose. I really didn't have a good idea of what I wanted to do with it until I was probably 21. So it was a very explorative period in my life during college and later on in high school too. So it was kind of one of those things where I just hopped around, played gigs, and played in bands and wrote songs, and did the singer-songwriter thing for a while. And surprisingly, it just was it was something that I eventually just kind of got hooked on film and the music specifically in film. Like I always just got hooked on those goosebump moments in film where the music and what you're watching visually just kind of come together. And I realized I was like, wow, like that's what I want to do. I want to create those moments and, give people that opportunity to experience those same things. So it was it was a very interesting startup. My method is very unorthodox compared to what most composers today are using. It's definitely making a transition to probably closer to the direction of how I operate and how I build and compose the music for certain projects. And so it's definitely unique. That's kind of how I got hooked on it, I guess. It was funny. It wasn't really a family tradition sort of thing. I just kind of got hooked on it. Not much
awesome.
of a family history behind theirs, but yeah.
So are you like a one-man band? Like, why is it unique?
What's
you
that?
playing every instrument?
Yeah, growing up, I think it was around 15, I played bass, and then the next year I was like, all right, I got this figured out. I'm going to learn how to play guitar next. And then I went from there to like the piano, and then there from the drums, and just kind of, I don't know, I started kind of making my way around the room, so to speak.
Weren't the piano and guitar similar, aren't they, in terms of their chord or their play structure?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's I know a lot of people that can go between the two not fairly easily, but it's easy to learn between the two.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's fairly easy to put together.
Do you live in LA?
Surprisingly, no. I'm actually based out in Chicago. I've moved back and forth a good handful of times in the last 8 years or so, and so I was originally living down in Orlando, Florida, and moved up here to get connected with a few other people. I started a film company with a friend of mine, and he's kind of operating the thing on his own, but I kind of stepped off and decided to just pursue music specifically, as opposed to working on film projects and kind of taking control of some of those opportunities. So it was easier for me to just handle the music side of things. So
does your company do film production in all aspects, or specifically music, or what do you guys do?
Well, I ended up leaving that company and started my own individual company, basically as a composer, working for licensing platforms, film, television, media, commercial work, industrial stuff like that. So.
How have you found that process of creating for like a service like that? Like, have you found that to be freeing? Have you found it to be a little bit handcuffed? Like, what's kind of your thought on that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I guess having a business that really that really revolves around just getting the right product to the client. It's really interesting for licensing. I guess I'll start with licensing, is because it's such a big business and a huge market, especially in today's age where people are typically, creating YouTube videos and stuff all the time. And whenever they're wanting to post something on those, online websites or social media platforms, the music, is kind of key for them, at least when it comes to either getting following or just getting the music to fit well with whatever it is that they're creating. And so the licensing opportunities were kind of what I started with when I, kind of started the company and began working in that area of business. And it was definitely unique because I was used to just kind of writing whatever I wanted. And at that point, the teams on those platforms would say, all right, well, we need, 3 or 4 tracks a month that fit, within these, few different categories of music. And so that's what I would do. I'd kind of set up a schedule and just kind of, write accordingly to what they needed in their catalog. And sometimes, like, they didn't necessarily need anything. They just wanted something, fun, uplifting. They'd give me a very brief description about what they thought would be great for, this coming month. And then I would, get a little bit more freedom and get to just have some fun with it. But that's kind of what got me started. There's definitely a lot of success in it if you're really putting a lot of focus into the areas that you have, a fair amount of talent in. They're also pretty selective too. The platforms are definitely not. They don't just let in anybody.
Interesting.
I can imagine.
But
hey, Chris, you still with us?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Chris, what kind of question would you like to ask Cody?
And it's a little difficult because I haven't heard a lot of his responses through the phone call. But for me, inspiration in putting a video together of music is a big part of it. And I'm listening on SoundStripe, and I'm not necessarily looking at the artist, the composer. I just listen to a little bit of the song, and just majority of the time over the time I've been working with JMK, a lot of Cody Martin's been popping up, and it's just the pieces that I've been editing. They're just your music just it stands out to me. So I really love a lot of your work.
You're doing a lot of stuff with SoundStripe. How did you get involved with that, Cody?
They were a company that I was actually not too familiar with, and at the time I was working a full-time job and hadn't gone full-time in music yet. I'd been working a full-time job and was working and saving, investing in my studio, investing in some equipment that I knew I was going to need. And a buddy of mine who is he owns his own film business and does a lot of wedding videography and commercial work for companies. He was telling me about this website. He's like, yeah, you should apply and send some of your music to them and see if they like it, and if and maybe you'll get a job there and they'll hire you. And so at the time I had probably applied for maybe 3 or 4 other platforms and hadn't gotten any luck at that time. And to be fair, I was still pretty new to the game and still was writing a lot of, a lot of my earlier and older works that, were not quite to the level of quality that I'm currently producing. And so but I was still, really shooting for it and just aiming for something. And so I just was like, yeah, I'll go for it. And so I went over to SoundStripe and kind of signed up and, was able to submit an application to him and submitted some music. And surprisingly, within 24 hours, they hit me up and said, "Hey, we'd like to talk more about having you on the catalog." And that's kind of how it all started. That was kind of the first platform that I really got a good grip on and got to have the opportunity to work with. And they've been great. They've got a great team behind them, and I mean, are very reasonable with their artists and tend to take care of everybody. So
you gave us a few options to play today to like kind of listen to and get an idea of things that you have composed that are on
Yes.
SoundStripe. First one I'm going to play is called Dark Night. Let's play and just listen to a little bit of it.
That was fantastic. Was just out of curiosity, is Knight spelled Knighghd?
No.
I was like, I can see some Batman influence there, maybe. It's fantastic. That's incredible,
there's a lot of Hans Zimmer influence onto that track. So
yeah.
they've got it was one of those things. It's so funny. It's technically not spelled Dark Knight as in Knight. It's Night. So
Smart. Yeah. But it sounds very...
need to keep it's a kind of funny thing when you're working with licensing tracks, because you create styles and certain type of rhythms and arrangements that are suited for certain styles and genres, and a lot of times what a filmmaker or someone will use, they'll just go into the search bar and just type in, oh well, this is I want to look for something that sounds like Hans Zimmer, or they'll just hashtag Dark Knight, or like Dune, or whatever it is that it might be, that they're wanting to find something similar to, and the music and the algorithm on SoundStripe will just kind of bring you to songs that sound similar to those. And I've done my best to kind of categorize the names to the styles in which that they best represent, and that's just a good example. One of the good examples of how people actually find my stuff and end up using it. So
it's really impressive, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, you said you had another question for Cody.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know you've composed, a lot of music for SoundStripe, but then you've composed music for commercials. And so with like a commercial, you'll have, direction from the client saying, hey, this is the kind of piece we would like. And other times you create just your own creation. Is there one that you, do you prefer one over the other? Is one more challenging than the other to do?
Did you guess that?
Yeah, Cody, I don't think you're hearing Chris.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, fellas. You might have to repeat that one for me.
He essentially just asked you've done stuff for obviously SoundStripe and SoundCloud, different platforms, but he was wondering if you've done something commercially that you're really proud of or something. What's
yes,
kind of something
absolutely.
you've done that maybe we all are aware of, or he can really you're something you're really proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the more recent projects I did commercially was in 2021. It was for Land Rover. They had released a new Discovery model in their automobile catalog, and they reached out to me the year before and basically said, "Hey, we're scheduling we're scheduling for this release next year." For this reveal for this new model that we're developing, and we have 9 commercial spots, and we need each one of those commercial spots to kind of be covered. And they had actually found some of my music on a different licensing platform called Artlist, and they had said, we really like this one song in your catalog. Would you be able to create a bespoke version of this for our commercial? So basically, different enough to where it wasn't going to cause any legal issues, but similar to style to where they'd be able to still claim it as their own, that sort of thing. So it was one of those projects where I hopped on board and worked for about I think it was about 2 months. I was on board with their production team and put things together, and then and they released it around January last year, I believe. So
it's gotta be cool to be emulating sounds that way when you hear something and trying to recreate a similar feel.
Yeah. It's always a blast to just toy around with that sort of stuff. That's half the fun.
What main program do you use to make music?
Surprisingly, I'm heavily versed in Logic. It's funny. Most composers that I'm aware of typically use Pro Tools because, in most cases, they'll find every opportunity that they can to record live. And the difference between them and myself would be that I really utilize the properties of sound libraries, and just basically aim to make the sounds sound as absolutely authentic and realistic as they possibly can. And it's kind of like Photoshop for music. Essentially, is just being able to kind of manipulate the sounds and change them in a way that makes them sound as real as humanly possible.
That's so cool.
And so it saves a lot of time and saves a lot of money for a lot of larger productions, especially if they're having a smaller budget on music. And so in most cases, if that's the case and they're running lower on a budget, but still have a decent amount of time and effort and energy to put into it, those are the projects that I thrive on, because they you skip the hassle of having to, go to a studio and record an orchestra live, which I still support and recommend as the main, the main alternative, or I should say that should be the first thing that you do. If you have the money to record in a live orchestra, you by all means should do it, because it's going to sound the most real that it possibly can.
It's expensive,
but it's also expensive, yes. So, but in most cases, I know that the projects that I probably am more passionate about typically don't have those sort of budgets on them. So I stick to what I know does a really good job. So Logic is great for multi-tracking and, tracking a lot of instruments at once. Logic is okay at that, but isn't on the same level. And it's just, Logic just isn't designed to do that. But in regards to just being a good platform that you can rely on that doesn't crash too often on you, it's a lot easier on you. So
you're familiar with the watermarks they put on the SoundStripe catalog?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So Rick and I earlier, we were discussing that we ran across, it was like a docu-series or some TV show, and then somehow they had actually left the SoundStripe watermark on the music.
It made it on there. Yeah, I'm like, I must have rewinded it like 3 or 4 times and was just laughing hysterically because you could just hear it on me.
SoundStripe.
Oh, man, that's funny.
So I have this might be an interesting question. So Harvey and I are both big comedy nerds, and we love stand-up comedy. And I've listened to comedians talk about how sometimes they're cautious to listen to other comedians because they don't want to pick up things from them. How does that work for you with music? Are you listening to other people, or are you not listening to other people because you don't want to potentially be influenced or have something happen where all of a sudden you're like, you're copying somebody, but you're only doing it completely unintentionally?
Yeah, well, the best way that the best way I can respond to that is that it's honestly probably that's probably what I would recommend most artists to do, is to find other composers that you love their music to, because if you really want to become your own thing, you have to be willing to figure out how these other composers do what they do and how they do it. And once you figure that out, change it enough to where you can keep it as your own, because eventually, like, the more you listen to it, it's kind of like, I'm probably not the only composer that does this, but in all honesty, I probably listen to more of my own music than I do other musicians. Typically, when I'm starting a new project and I'm working on something new, I'll go to, a couple of my favorite composers and listen to something that they've done recently, if it fits within what I'm kind of looking to do. In a lot of ways, it gives me inspiration to kind of toy around and create sounds that are similar but different. Because at the end of the day, it's really hard to perfectly replicate something like.
Sure.
Like replicating sound isn't illegal to do. Replicating the melody and the full structure of a composition is another thing. Like that can get dangerous. But in most cases, I know Hans Zimmer is one of the composers that I think it was him and Thomas Newman. They were both very adamant on the idea of taking something that inspires you and creating something that even inspires you more with the music that you've listened to. So it's a really good practice, and you can apply that really with, I mean, not with just music, but with film or anything. Like, I mean, there's a buddy that I know that's I'm actually scoring for it's a indie feature, and they basically created a film that looks like it has a budget of a few $1,000,000, but they did it for $50,000, and they did it because they put a lot of time and effort and energy into their own time just doing this. And a lot of what they did, their shots, their coloring, a lot of this is just stuff that they picked up from a lot of the guys that they follow and a lot of the directors that that they pay attention to. And it's really them just really doing their best to mimic what they do so that they can learn how to do it even more properly as time progresses.
Okay.
And it was a really cool strategy that I'd see them do. Because there's some things you just can't learn at college.
Right, of course not.
Yeah.
The best thing is to learn in college. We're not in classroom.
Right.
I'm curious about what step the music happens in the production of a film. Are you in the editing room with people, or is the edit done when you're putting music on top of it, or is it raw footage that you're using?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, in most cases, I would say that normally around 80% of everything is typically done. So what I'll normally do is just start with the areas of the film that I know are done and give them time to finish the rest of it. I'm actually in the middle of a documentary right now that is very similar to that. When they contacted me and wanted me to start working on it, they only had about half of the film done. So it was one of those scenarios where I was like, well, hey, I'll start where I know we're done, and if we need to kind of come back and kind of weave things back together a little bit later, we can do that. But my main, I guess, objective was to just keep things going. So,
well, let's listen to another cut that you gave us. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this. Ecclesia.
That was it. Yes.
These are unbelievable, man. They're really, really
thanks,
great.
brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, truly. I can just easily picture that being in any movie that I watch 100%.
Well, I was thinking like something that we use for Encore.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I totally had it.
yeah.
I visioned it being I could almost see it perfectly in a couple of different items that we've done for one of our clients.
Yeah, I can see that. But at the end of the second act, though, or starting at the third, they've just reached their lowest point. They're climbing out the dirt or whatever.
So good, man.
So in a piece like that, what are you thinking to had they given you hey, we need so many happy tunes and so many dark tunes, and I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, that's typically what they'll do. They'll just kind of give me a list of, we want something that's very classical, or we want something very orchestral and cinematic, so larger and more, I guess, modern is what they typically call it. And then they'll say, we want, some uplifting tracks and something that's more driving. And a lot of times that's really just the specifics that they'll give. They really do create a lot of creative freedom for you, as an artist to really just, I mean, just dig in and just create something unique. But as long as you kind of fit within those parameters of what they're looking for, that's really what they care about most. So Ecclesia was one of those examples where they wanted something orchestral but very upbeat and modern. So I really did my best to utilize, for the most part, just a more modern, sort of rhythm and beat, in regards to a drum pattern and some guitars or mandolins or strings, and just really doing my best to kind of incorporate a lot of those sounds together to create something unique. But the strings and the orchestral section, toward that last chorus at the end of that song was very heavily inspired by some of Thomas Newman's arrangements, and he did a bunch of different films, but he did Finding Nemo. He did 1927 or 1917. Thank you. Yes, that was the one. And a lot of his swells, he's good on, he knows how to make swells really impact you. And so that's kind of what I did my best to replicate, was some of his swells and how they come in, how they feel, and they just colorize a lot of what's going on audibly.
We thank you for spending some time with us, Cody, and letting us
yeah,
hear
absolutely.
some of your music. I mean, we could probably talk to you like all day.
I literally have 100 more questions I could probably ask.
we have so many questions.
Real quick, where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find me a couple different places. I'll name a couple off the bat. In regards to licensing music, you can find a lot of my stuff on SoundStripe, and that's just under Cody Martin. If you search my name, I'll come right up. I'm typically somewhere on the main page anyway, so you just, if you dig around a little bit, you'll find me. On art, I'm on another licensing platform called Artlist. My moniker / artist name on that platform is CK Martin. And then you can go to my personal website, which is www.codykurtzmartin.com. Kurtz is spelled with a Z at the end, so don't don't mess that one up. Otherwise, you'll end up somewhere else.
And you can find us on iTunes and most any platform that does a podcast. And I hear we're even on YouTube.
We are on YouTube.
Wow.
Which is my favorite place to watch us.
Yeah. So we're the JMKast, and
like, share, subscribe, share, get us to your friends.
It's Oscar time.
It is Oscar time. This is where we have to play.
This is where we play ourselves off the show.
Cody, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Cody.
Chris,
absolutely,
as well.
fellas.
Harvey, thank you so much for sitting third chair.
Thank you, guys.
Greg, Rick, we are out of here. We'll see you guys next week.
Like, subscribe, comment. Bye.